Do smartphone contracts still make sense?
And Netflix is coming, so how can Aussie services fight back? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm here with the face that launched 1,000 tweets, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's new in tech?
Well, the first thing that's new, Adam, is that this is our 1-year anniversary show. Everybody, celebrate!
Sorry, I forgot to get you flowers.
Vodafone and Optus have both switched on enhancements to their 4G networks. In Vodafone's case, it's enhancements in the 850 MHz and 2600 MHz ranges, where Optus is playing around in the 1800 and 700 MHz network ranges. The 700 MHz network spectrum isn't technically meant to be available to carriers until early next year, but like Telstra, Optus has managed to gain permission to switch it on in a bunch of trial sites.
Google is adding a tighter vetting process for Android TV apps, hoping to improve the hit and miss user experience on the big screen. It will be interesting to see if Google extends these quality control guidelines to other devices such as Android Wear smartwatches.
Telstra has flicked the switch on its free Wi-Fi network nationally, which in its trial period will offer anyone, whether or not you're a Telstra customer or not, up to 30 minutes of high-speed internet access. The plan is that if you're a Telstra customer, you'll be able to use your own home broadband network to join the Wi-Fi network, and in return you'll get free access, meted against your home usage, on any of Telstra's hotspot network points or any international points through a partnering agreement.
If you're stressed about the thought of putting your life in the hands of an Uber driver, you can now relax by streaming your favourite Spotify playlist through the car stereo. The new deal with Spotify lets you dictate the music from the back seat, but drivers still demand control over the windows and the aircon. So, Alex, Telstra's ambitious new Wi-Fi network is getting off the ground. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, it's a really interesting project. They see it as a big kind of customer retention and acquisition play, because if you're an existing Telstra fixed line customer, you can go out, hook into one of their Wi-Fi hotspots, use the data quota that you're given at home, and for a lot of people they never get near their quota points, so it's a bit like having a free hotspot on the go as long as you're near one of their hotspot points.
Yeah, see, I can understand that, but if you're a Telstra customer and you're on the 4G network, I'm wondering if roaming on the Wi-Fi is actually a step backwards. If that Wi-Fi network coming from the phone box down the road isn't going to hit 50, 60 megabits per second, then maybe all you've done is offloaded yourself from the network, so you're not getting what you pay for, and now everyone else can use the network. So I want to see what the performance is like from the phone boxes, not just during the trial phase.
Well, look, I mean, I've done a few early tests, and the early performance, of course, is brilliant because there's virtually nobody on the network.
Naturally,
as soon as
it's like the first guy on 700 megahertz.
Then it might be a bit interesting. But the same is true of 4G.
Yeah.
You can get exactly the same thing with 4G. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind there is Telstra charges a pretty penny for its 4G data.
Yeah.
I mean, its home broadband is not exactly the bargain of the century either, but it's much, much cheaper. Yeah. And there's a certain convenience thing. And also the other thing is, of course, right now and at least until the end of the year, this is all trial stuff. So it's all them kind of testing the waters, working out what works, working out what doesn't. There's no guarantees of speed or anything like that. But hey, it's free. You can't really lose too much out of it. It'll be next year when they start kind of building this wider mesh of millions of hotspots and getting all of their users to then kind of offload some of their capacity to create this kind of wide thing. That's where it'll really pick up some kind of value and some interest, I think.
Alex, contract versus outright. It's the eternal smartphone question. Which do you go, one way or the other?
Well, I think there's been a bit of a shift in this recently because, I mean, historically, the phone was the thing that you got with the contract. Lots and lots of people would just kind of think, right, well, my 2-year contract's up, so I'll recontract and I'll get a new phone then, whether or not I need a new phone, you know, back in feature phone days. And that still happens to an extent, even with people who've got smartphones and who technically could squeeze a new phone out of their telco. They just kind of go, oh, I'll just keep paying the contract. And of course, the telcos love that because they don't have to hand over a new handset. But there's been this whole rash of new phones coming out, and it's not just your real prepaid, you know, bargain, cheapy, horrible numbers. As you know, I love a big prop, and I've got a particularly big prop on me today, the Huawei Mate 7. Beautiful phone, very nice. I'm in the middle of
you could club a man to death with that phone.
Now, this is a very, very nice phone. It's quite premium, but you can only buy it outright. HTC has announced the Desire I is also another phone you can only buy outright. All of Motorola's recent phones, outright only.
Does that mean you can't buy them from the telcos? Is that why the telcos don't want to sell them, so you have to buy them outright elsewhere?
Well, they're not on sale through the telcos. They're on sale through your Dick Smiths or JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman or stores like that. And the thing there is, okay, you've then got to pay $500, $600, $700, $800 up front, but you've then got the freedom of the device. You can take it to whichever network will support it. You can chop and change, depending on whether or not a network suddenly gets better reception or somebody has a really good deal that month. And because you've got mobile number portability, of course, you can do that, to your heart's content, till they screw your number up, which
if you want to,
happens.
I wouldn't recommend doing that more often than you have to. We continue.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't do it month in, month out, but it's something that you could do,
if you
once or twice a year if you needed to, if there was a genuine benefit to it. And of course, you own the phone outright, so at the end of what you might think your contract period, or if another tastier phone comes along, you can kind of go, right, I can sell this, and I can sell it to anyone who can use it on any other network. It's completely unlocked, free and clear. Now, some of this I think has also come about because the telcos have become a lot more reticent to subsidise a lot of handsets. If you look at the ranges that they're carrying, there are fewer phones, and generally you're paying a higher price than you used to for having the phone. They call it all sorts of different terms, but that fee that you pay on top of your monthly access fee for your data and calls and so on is higher than it used to be. There's less of a subsidy, and they seem to be trying to squeeze more out of you for having that phone through them. Or like Telstra does, they do the whole new phone thing where you can trade it in at the end of the year, but you're then recontracting for a further 2 years. They want to retain customers, but they don't seem to want to sell phones quite as much.
Yeah. I've noticed with I use an iPhone on Telstra, and I've noticed every time I've recontracted to get a new phone, the deals are always a bit more expensive than the time before. And so I'm paying a little bit more each time, whether I really like it or not.
Yeah, whereas I'm a prepaid customer and have been for ages. I much prefer to own my own phone, and that way I can kind of jump around. But look, there are some downsides to not doing the contract thing. The prepaid deals are typically a little bit worse in terms of what you actually get.
That's part of it, yeah.
Although these days, for things like calls and texts, a lot of that it's virtually unlimited on even the cheapest kind of prepaid plans. There's so many minutes or so much calling allowance. You'd have to be doing a lot to go through it all. It's the data where it really comes to bite you. But there are ways and means around that if you're clever, and depending on which networks you can access where you are. The other thing, of course, with being a contract, and this depends on who you are and how you work, is you've only got that monthly contract payment. It's a little bit easier to bear in the pocket, and depending on how you manage your taxes, you may also be able to claim all of that, whereas for a device, you've typically got to depreciate it over a few years.
I think everybody sort of needs to crunch their numbers for themselves. Look at your usage, as you say. Look at the fact that your prepaid deals might not be as good a value for money, but if you're not using much, then maybe once you expand it all out, you might have to turn to a spreadsheet, but in the end, you might decide it's a better deal.
So Adam, it's finally official. We are getting Netflix in Australia. But what's it all going to mean?
Yes, the world's worst kept secret has finally been confirmed. Netflix is coming to Australia in March. That's about all we know at this point. We don't have any confirmation on pricing, although you would think it'd be somewhere between $10 and $15 per month. The other interesting thing is that they mentioned high def and 4K in their very short press release.
4K is a big, bold thing to offer Australia.
It's a bit optimistic.
As far as I'm aware, if they do it, they're going to be the first to offer 4K.
That's what I was going to say. I think they will be the first, unless someone gets in quickly over summer. I think they will be the first to offer 4K. But even then, I think it only works with some device. I think you have to have certain compatible devices to get the 4K. So it will depend on whether people here have got the devices.
Forget the compatible devices. For Australia, you've got to have a broadband connection that's going to work.
Exactly.
And unless you're sitting on NBN fibre, your odds are very low that you're going to get a really consistent, good 4K stream.
So that is good in some ways for Australians. It creates a bit more competition, puts pressure on the others. Like a Stan may not have come along if Netflix wasn't coming. Some of the other things that are happening, and maybe thanks to Netflix. So it's good to put a bit of pressure on them. One of the interesting things, though, is that the biggest competition to Netflix is, of course, Netflix. And what will they do to get the 200,000 Australians who are already paying for Netflix to pay for Australian Netflix? Part of me says they'll crack down on Australian credit cards and that won't really stop people. But another part of me says they may not care. Because they've already got that 200,000. What they want now is the next million after the mums and dads.
I think I agree with that part of you because there's evidence elsewhere that they don't seem to care. They like getting people's money because they're a business and that's what businesses do. But they operate in other markets, like they operate in the UK. And the amount of content they've got in the UK is minimal compared to their US offering. But plenty of people in the UK just have accounts with both because there's some stuff that's only in the UK store. I would imagine that if I was Netflix, I'd be trying to tie down some stuff that will only be in the Australian store that's of interest to Australians. Presumably something a little bit fancier than, reruns of Kingswood Country or something. But they'll try and grab something
Leave the money
local.
on the fridge.
It seems unlikely to me that they'd fund any local productions, but they might try and grab the rights to a few local things to show. And that'll be kind of interesting as well.
But they're also hamstrung.
I don't think they're going to block people. And the thing is, I don't think that's the market they're going to be going after anyway, because, as you say, they're going to be about 10 to 15 bucks. They're probably going to be a smaller selection. Oh, no, stuff it. I'm going to call it. They will be a smaller selection. Don't think that Australian Netflix is going to have the same amount of content as the US does, because
no way in
they
hell.
won't.
They just can't do it. They can't, and that's what some people don't seem to get, is that Netflix here will not be the same as Netflix there. And one other thing is they're hamstrung by their own local content deals. It looks like that their own shows are Orange is the New Black and House of Cards may not be on Netflix Australia because Foxtel's already paid for them. So for now,
Foxtel's
they
got the
can't even
rights,
show
and
their own stuff.
In the minimalist release that they put out, they hyped some of their upcoming stuff. So they've got that really cool deal where they're doing a bunch of Marvel shows. They didn't mention House of Cards. They didn't mention Orange is the New Black. They love mentioning those whenever they can because they're
content
original.
And
they're original content, and they're not mentioning it. And you got to think, well, yeah, Foxtel has deals for that, so maybe they've kind of undercut themselves a bit there. It'll be interesting to see where that one evolves. But the other big question then is, what do the existing services do to combat Netflix? Because the advantage for us as consumers is, it's competition, but what does that competition mean? What do you think, for example, 9 and 7 and 10 and even the ABC and SBS should be doing? What should Foxtel be doing?
Well, Foxtel's an aside, but what the commercial networks should be doing is circling
I'm sure they'll be happy
wagons.
to hear that.
They should be circling the wagons and working together, and they're not. They almost strangle each other to death just trying to put together Freeview Plus. Now you've got 9's coming up with Stan, 7 and 10. Yes, 7 and 10 are working on their own subscription services. Right, so there's 3 subscription services. Each want $10 a month, and then whichever else comes along. They're fragmenting too much. If 7, 9, and 10, or even 7 and 9, God forbid, could actually work together and come up with the one service and combine their efforts, it would be a much more attractive proposition against Netflix. And the real smart thing to do, I think, would be to tie it up with their catch-up TV services. Go the Hulu model, where you have your free account, you get all the catch-up TV from the last couple of weeks, and then you can pay extra for the premium for the Plus account, and that gets you into all the subscription stuff. So people will already be using the service anyway for the free stuff, and then go, yeah, I'll give them $10. That's the smart way to do it. But like I said, they hate each other's guts so much that they can't even work together in the face of an 800-pound common enemy.
I'm sure that Netflix is the 800-pound enemy.
You don't
Netflix
think, you
US,
think Foxtel is?
Netflix US, that's the 800-pound enemy, and I think the people who are already subscribing to Netflix US will continue to do so. Yeah. It's capturing those other, 19 million and however many 100,000 Australians there are left over who are not Netflix subscribers. That's what Netflix will be pitching towards. Foxtel's much bigger threat in terms of what it's offering. Netflix is going to come in. Presumably, they're doing content deals as quickly and as busily as they can for anything they can get their hands on. But they're not going to. I don't think they're going to come in with a big brand name. People are going to, Netflix, I've heard of that.
But you're never going to get Foxtel for $10 a month, though. It is Foxtel Play is a slightly different proposition. You're getting different content. You may be getting better content sooner, but you're paying a lot more for it. So there will be some people who will say, well, if I'm giving you $10, I may as well give you.
I'm going to take a devil's advocate position here. Are you paying a whole lot more for it? We've discussed this in previous episodes if you've been watching along. They've cut their prices pretty radically. I think it's fair to say that Netflix is unlikely to launch here given they've raised their US prices as it is, for less than $15 Australian, and I would not be surprised to see $20. At which point
Netflix is dead in the water if they're $20 Australian. They may as well just pack up and go home now.
But equally, why would they do $10? Explain to me $10 when Netflix US is more than $10 if you're a new subscriber.
They're going to have to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
They're going to have to be somewhere in the middle, and even there, you start inching closer and closer and closer, and Foxtel can say, with a certain amount of 800-pound gorilla authority, hey, look, we've got all this other stuff, including, hey, look, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black.
And all this HBO content you will never get on Netflix because HBO and Netflix hate each other's guts.
And the big challenge as well for the commercial networks, of course, is as soon as people are paying for Netflix, they're paying for TV. And as soon as they're doing that, it doesn't take much of a kind of a flick of the mental switch to get people to pay that little bit more for Foxtel if they suddenly view, well, actually I might get a little bit more with
I'm paying anyway, yeah.
I'm paying anyway. Whereas for the commercial networks, of course, their big thing has been, hey, we're free to air. You don't actually have to pay to watch us.
So that about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Holden. Happy anniversary, Alex. I'm sorry that I forgot. Thank you also for joining us for the last year, and stick with us for the year ahead because we've got some big things planned.
And if you like what you see, remember, hammer that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.